But I went back over to the doctor and I said, look, just because you're placing, or if you're going to place a DNR in my mummy, that doesn't mean to me, and it shouldn't mean that my mummy will not be receiving treatment. And I want to make sure that my mummy receives the same treatment that somebody else would get, despite her age.
The scale of the concern amongst the COVID bereaved members of all these problems with DNA CPR notices.
I know this has been highlighted so many times, but yeah, this has been a major issue for, bereaved families in our Northern Ireland group. One lady in our group had lost her husband. There was no discussion at all with that family. Another young woman who's here today, and her mother, they lost their brother, uncle. He had Down syndrome. And, 1 minute they were told that, he was fine, he was recovering well, and then the next 5 minutes they got a phone call to say, you need to be at the hospital here.
What steps did your members have to take when they were told they were going to have to wait for hours for an emergency ambulance?
I mean, most of us were told, don't bother ringing 999, take them yourselves. My sister had to literally bump my dad down the stairs and take him in the car. I mean, the poor man could barely walk. When I did arrive, fortunately we were allowed to be with him when he died. I was told, he became agitated. Well, now we know he's probably agitated because he hadn't had oxygen for 40 minutes. But I, as you do, and I was in a panic and very distressed. I said, please, can you try again? And the doctor said, that ship has sailed.
You set out a number of your members' concerns around DNA CPR notices during the pandemic, and in particular, a lack of communication around those decisions. And I think you give the example of one patient who lacked capacity and had, in fact, a lasting power of attorney for one of their family members, but they weren't involved in any consultation around the making of a DNA CR notice. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, most of us were not consulted, and most of us didn't find out there even was one placed until we got hold of our hospital notes, and that could be some months, even years later.
I think you also give the example of a patient who was refused antibiotics on the basis of their clinical frailty score that was relayed to you by another member. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. And she was also power of attorney as well.
She had power of attorney?
Yes, and that wasn't, that seemed to be ignored.
So she wasn't consulted?
Not at all.
Put out in your witness statement that at least four of your members experienced the hospital morgue having lost the bodies of their loved ones.
My co-founder, Nikki Gerard, went on television on March the 13th, 2020, and said for people living with dementia, separation and isolation will be worse risk than COVID, and that has proved to be true.
Give you an opportunity, if you want it, to come back to a couple of topics and say a bit more if you want to. The first of it relates to people with dementia in hospital during the pandemic and their particular experience. You've touched on the position of people with dementia generally. What were the particular difficulties faced by people with dementia in hospital during the pandemic?
I think if you designed a system to make dementia worse, you would have pretty well done what happened in the pandemic.
I had many conversations about the fact that I would be keeping him at home because I did not feel that he would be treated safely in hospital because of his complexity of needs.
When my mother was admitted in a state of delirium with very high temperature, and therefore, in my view, she did not have capacity to consent to DNA CPR. She had signed the form and she remembered doing that, but what she said to me was, I didn't understand what the doctor was telling me, and I felt that she was putting words in my mouth. We have members who were told that they could be with their loved ones when they died, but if they did that, they wouldn't be able to attend the funeral. So that was a Hobson's choice. That was no choice at all, because those two things were vitally important to us. There were restrictions around the funerals in terms of numbers. Everything was forbidden, and it was all related to it's all because of COVID.
As I said, for 10 months, even as she lay dying, I could have no physical contact with her.
Well, if they were to say they were following guidelines, I don't understand any guideline that keeps a family member out from a dying parent in their last hours. If they didn't get in during COVID, that was bad enough. But end-of-life care, to me, is a human right.
It felt brutal, and in view of Dad's robust physical health, to place a DNA CPR on him appeared to be simply because of his age.
You know, she was a healthy young woman in her 20s, apart from the epilepsy. And at that time, she was in better health than the rest of us. So I had suspicions that for her, it would be no more than flu. And I didn't see why I should agree to a DNA CPR for a healthy young woman in her 20s.
In fact, I was very angry when she told me my daughter was dying. And unfortunately, I absolutely screamed down the phone, because it's how I felt, and I still feel it to this day, that she had got dumped on the scrap heap because of her disabilities, and that is how I really feel about it.
Do you remember what the doctor said?
The doctor said, we don't take COVID-positive residents to hospital. Order the end-of-life pack. I'd read in the press a statement from the local medical director a week earlier saying that there was absolutely no barrier to care home residents with COVID going into hospital, and that they were sitting at 55% occupancy, and there was absolutely no reason why they wouldn't be admitted.
My father's death certificate, it took us a long while to receive it. COVID was first, with heart failure second, and we don't know now, did his heart stop? Did his heart failure kill him? Did the DCPR? Did the COVID kill him? There's so many unanswered questions, it's just don't know.
And we weren't really sure if it was grief or if it was COVID, but equally, she didn't have any symptoms. Yeah. So although she tested positive and had been exposed since at least the 25th of April, even by the middle of May, she wasn't showing any of the key symptoms.
And can I ask you this? You say in your statement that the day that your mum died was the day that in the press there were photos of the drinks party at Downing Street. How did that make you and your family feel, having just lost now your other parent and seeing photos like that?
Yeah, it just felt so cruel, you know, that we had done all the right things, that we had followed all the rules down to the funerals, to then see that. And of course, that picture is regularly reprinted, which means that it just brings that terrible day back all the time.
There should never have been blanket rules. Blanket rules, by their very nature, are not human rights compliant. I do have some concerns about the blanket use of isolation, and I think that's we heard so much harm that was being caused by those isolation measures. Those isolation periods caused untold suffering to people around. So we have people who said that they were longing for some wallpaper to look at, so they didn't have to look at white walls. People told us, I'm barely existing. There were people who were self-harming, withdrawing and hitting themselves in frustration, biting their arm because they couldn't verbalise their distress. People who were strapped in their chair for 14 days.
Thank you. I just want to move to a related topic, which is do not attempt cardiopulmonary resuscitation notices. And you explain in your statement that all GPs have put in place DNA CPRs on their patients. Was that all of your patients in the care home?
Yeah. Yes. I came back from a meeting and 50% of them had already had the paperwork in place because they'd been sent to them, and then they had all had DNRs in place.
And was there, to your knowledge, any consultation
No.
with the patient or their families?
No.
You also had experience of patients with unrelated illnesses to COVID-19.
Yes.
Who ambulances refused initially to take to hospital.
Yes.
That was involving diabetes, with
Yes.
blood sugar levels lowering.
Yeah.
But also where a patient of yours fell and received a fracture.
Yes. So without getting GPs there, we rang an ambulance. Well, the GP told me to ring an ambulance. So the paramedics came, and because he got a slight temperature, obviously, because he got an infection, they refused to take him. And it took me 3 hours to argue for him to be admitted into hospital. And the ambulance was outside for 3 hours until somebody from ambulance headquarters admitted to take him in. And they said to me, they weren't local ambulance men, I don't know where they were from, but they said to me, the hospital aren't going to be very pleased with this. And I went outside the building and I did say to the ambulance men, it's not up to you to play God here. This time it was 6 o'clock, so everywhere was closed, so I couldn't get any oxygen. So the very next day, I rang her own GP, who was then back on duty. And I said the same thing to them. This lady's deteriorating overnight. She's very poorly. I need some oxygen. We've picked up the antibiotics. I need the oxygen. I need it ASAP because our oxygen levels are dropping down. And she prescribed end-of-life drugs. And we never, ever got the oxygen, ever.